So I think it's fair to say axolotls are becoming one of the most popular pets in the aquatic hobby at the moment. It's fair to say they really are trending, but they're not necessarily a pet for everybody. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 7 reasons you shouldn't get an axolotl. And if you watch each reason and feel you can still offer these fantastic creatures a home, then maybe they really are the pet for you. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard and I'm a fish, shrimp and axolotl keeper based in the UK. So let's start with the first reason I think most people shouldn't get an axolotl, and that is they don't really do much. Now, if you compare an axolotl to a goldfish or a tropical fish that swims around all the time, you'll quickly realize there is no comparison in terms of their activity levels. My goldfish, my angelfish, all of my tropical fish, they're constantly on the move. You look in the tank, there's always something to look at. Even my shrimp and my neon blue crayfish spend most of their time out and about doing something. There is always something of interest going on. Axolotls spend a lot of their time resting. They like to spend time in their cave or their hide or behind the rocks or in a clump of plants or sometimes just sitting. They're not an active pet that is constantly moving around. Anybody who has ever kept a pet snake will have a very similar experience. A pet snake likes to spend a lot of its time curled up in its cave, in its hide, under a log, whatever it might be. And it only typically comes out maybe when it's hungry or if it needs to warm up. And that is very similar to an axolotl. And when they're out, they're fabulous to look at. They really are one of the most unusual, interesting pets you can ever keep. But for the vast majority of their time, they will be tucked away in their hide, in their cave, or behind the rocks, wherever it might be. So if you want a pet that you see all the time, you get to continually interact with, then maybe an axolotl's not for you. But if you can accept the fact that when they're out, they're the coolest thing you'll ever see, but most of the time they'll be tucked away, then sure, get an axolotl. Now, the second reason you probably shouldn't get an axolotl is they're really sensitive to water temperature. Unlike, again, tropical fish who need to be kept warm, axolotls really need to be kept in cool water. In fact, their water needs to be kept at around 60 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 16 to 18 degrees Celsius. And it really should never exceed 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius. If the temperature in the axolotl tank gets too warm, your axolotls suffer, and they suffer really quickly. They really do go downhill at a rapid rate if they're kept in water that's too warm. So now I live here in the UK, and if I were to keep an axolotl in my house, in one of my regular rooms, it would be absolutely fine. In my new fish room that I'm just in the process of building here, I will move my axolotls in, but I'll keep them down low in the coolest parts of the room. If I put them up here on the top of the rack, the temperature, even without a heater, would be too warm and they would quickly suffer and their health would deteriorate. If you live in a real warm part of the world, if you live in the middle of Texas and you struggle to keep the temperature in your room down, then maybe an axolotl isn't for you. But if you can provide those constant water temperatures, if you can ensure you keep them in water where they don't get too hot, they really do make fabulous pets. Now, reason number 3 you probably shouldn't get an axolotl is they can be really sensitive to water quality. Now, what do we mean by water quality? Well, axolotls, they live in the water we provide them. If that water becomes poor quality, they can't exactly get out and move around. They're stuck with what they've got. Now, when our axolotls go to the bathroom, their waste is high in ammonia, and ammonia is really toxic to axolotls. In fact, it's toxic to pretty much all aquatic life. Now, fortunately, when we run a filter on our aquarium, those filters build up a level of a naturally occurring bacteria that converts that ammonia to the slightly less toxic nitrite. And nitrite is still really toxic to axolotls. But again, fortunately for us, there is a different strain of naturally occurring bacteria which converts the toxic nitrite all the way to the somewhat less toxic nitrate. And axolotls can tolerate higher levels of nitrates than they can nitrite or ammonia. But here's the important point. The filter does nothing to get rid of that nitrate, and we, as axolotl keepers, have to remove that nitrate by carrying out regular partial water changes. We have to drain down our axolotl tank by 10, 20, 50%, whatever it might be, and top it back up with fresh, dechlorinated tap water. Now, this is a part of owning an axolotl you really can't skip. If you don't carry out regular partial water changes, the quality of the water you keep your axolotl in will deteriorate, and it will deteriorate quickly. Potentially within just a few weeks of not carrying out a regular water change, your axolotl's health will suffer and your axolotl may well succumb to a pest or a disease. And once an axolotl's health starts to deteriorate, they go downhill quickly and you could lose your axolotl very, very quickly. So if you're not prepared to carry out regular partial water changes, maybe an axolotl's not the pet for you. But if you are, they are superb. You should definitely get one. Now, reason number 4, you probably shouldn't get an axolotl, is they really need to be kept in a species-only tank. What does that mean? That means if you think you'll want to have an aquarium in your house with an axolotl and some fish and maybe some shrimp, you need to think again. That'll be an absolute disaster. Axolotls need to be kept alone. Now, you will see videos or blog articles of people saying tank mates for axolotls, and they might suggest something fast swimming that can tolerate the cooler water, like a white cloud mountain minnow. But let me assure you, in the long run, the axolotl will end up eating those white clouds, and he may well cause himself a mischief shooting around the tank trying to catch them, because axolotls are clumsy. They bump into rocks and wood and the glass. So by adding tank mates to the tank, whilst you may think you are creating a more interesting environment for your axolotl, you really are potentially putting it at danger. Now, you can keep more than one axolotl in a tank. In theory, providing your tank is large enough, you can put 2 or even 3 axolotls. But sometimes they will fight. It's not unheard of for one axolotl to bite the limbs off another axolotl. And whilst axolotls are famed for their ability to regrow their limbs, who wants their pet to have to go through the trauma of having their leg bitten off and then regrown? So if you don't fancy keeping just a single axolotl in a tank in your house, then maybe they're not the right pet for you. But if you're quite happy with that understanding that you could potentially only keep one axolotl or maybe a pair in the tank and nothing else, then they make fabulous pets and you really should go for it. So reason number 5, you probably shouldn't get an axolotl, is they have a fairly specialized diet. Axolotls really want to be eating live food and more specifically, live worms. Now, I feed my axolotl regularly on live and frozen bloodworms and also live earthworms that I remove from my compost heap in my garden. Now, obviously, this is a lot more effort than just opening a tub of food and tipping it in like you might for your fish. Now, yes, they do make pellet foods for axolotls, but let me tell you from many, many years experience that axolotls will eat the pellets, but they don't choose to. They do much better on live or frozen foods that sort of recreate their natural diet. Now, you can add variety. I do occasionally put a cube of brine shrimp in with my axolotls, and I do sometimes put a cube of Daphnia or something similar in with my axolotls, and they will eat it. But they really, really want to be eating worms. They really want to be eating their natural diet. So if you feel that having to have constant access to live or frozen worms is not really for you, is more effort than you want to put in, then you probably shouldn't get an axolotl. But if you're happy making that commitment and being prepared to spend the money on the live or the frozen foods, then you should definitely get an axolotl. You won't regret it. Now, reason number 6 you might not want to get an axolotl is they do have good long life expectancies. An axolotl can easily live for 10 to 15 or even more years, and that's a proper commitment. That's the same sort of commitment as if you're getting a cat or a dog. You might go to the shop tomorrow and buy yourself half a dozen guppies, and you know within a couple of years they probably will have lived their life and passed away, and many fish keepers will keep one type of fish, keep them for their entire life, and then those fish pass away and they replace them. Maybe next time they get some angelfish or some mollies, whatever it might be. But if you do your job properly as an axolotl keeper, that axolotl will be with you for a decade and heading towards 2 decades, and that's real commitment. So if you're not prepared to invest that kind of commitment into your pet, then an axolotl might not be for you. But if you like the thought of having your new friend around for 10, 12, 15, however many years, then maybe you should try an axolotl. Now, reason number 7 an axolotl might not be the right pet for you is they do require a relatively large tank. As an absolute minimum, you want to be looking at 30 to 40 gallons, which is around 150 litres for a single axolotl. Anything smaller than that won't give your fully grown axolotl enough space to move around, And you'll find your water quality really does deteriorate quickly with a smaller volume of water. The water quality in a 20 gallon deteriorates far quicker than a 40 gallon. Now, bigger is always better. If you can go for a 60 or an 80 gallon, absolutely superb, all the better. But a 40 gallon tank is the best part of 3 feet long and does take up a reasonable amount of space in your house. So if you're not prepared to offer that much space to a single specimen for the next 10 to 15 years, then maybe an axolotl's not right for you. But if you have got the space, if you are prepared to put a tank of that size in, and you're happy to make that commitment for 10 to 15 years and feed your axolotl live or frozen worms and carry out the water changes, then maybe an axolotl would be the absolutely perfect pet for you. So if you are thinking an axolotl might be the right pet for you, and you're wondering, how should I go about setting up my new axolotl tank? You should definitely watch this video next. Thanks for watching.